My husband Mark and I pulled into the venue parking lot, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. Lily's wedding. My baby sister was getting married, and tucked safely inside Mark's jacket pocket was an envelope containing $10,000 in cash. Our gift to her. Our contribution to what we hoped would be the start of a beautiful life. We'd already paid for nearly a third of the wedding itself. The flowers, the upgraded catering package, the photographer she'd fallen in love with but couldn't quite afford. It was a lot of money, sure, but Mark's position in investment banking and my role as marketing director for a tech startup meant we could handle it. More than that, we wanted to. Lily was my only sister, and despite everything, I loved her. The venue was breathtaking. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, flowers everywhere, soft music drifting through the air. As we walked toward the ceremony space, I spotted my parents immediately. Mom was fussing with Dad's tie, her fingers working the silk, while he pretended to be annoyed, swatting her hands away playfully. But I could see the smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. They looked radiant. That was the only word that fit. Mom's face was practically glowing, her eyes bright with happiness, and Dad looked a decade younger than his 62 years. Something twisted, sharp, and uncomfortable. I couldn't remember them looking like this at my wedding 5 years ago. They'd been pleasant enough, sure. They'd smiled for photos, hugged me when I walked down the aisle, told me I looked beautiful. But not like this. Not with this bursting, overflowing joy that seemed to pour out of them. I pushed the thought away quickly. This wasn't the time. This wasn't the place. Today was about Lily, about her happiness, and I wasn't going to let old feelings creep in and ruin it. The ceremony was perfect. Lily looked absolutely stunning in her dress, all lace and silk and delicate beading that caught the light with every movement. Her fiancé, Jake, now her husband, couldn't take his eyes off her. His face showed pure adoration as she walked down the aisle. I sat between my parents and Mark, trying to focus on the beauty of the moment, on the vows being exchanged, on the happiness radiating from the couple at the altar. But that nagging feeling kept creeping back in. The way my parents were reacting, so completely invested, so emotionally present, felt different somehow from how they'd been at my wedding. After the ceremony came the reception. We ate prime rib that melted in your mouth. We drank champagne that bubbled and sparkled in crystal glasses. We danced to a live band that played everything from classic jazz to current pop hits. And then came the speeches. The best man went first, telling funny stories about Jake's college days. Then the maid of honor, Lily's best friend since kindergarten, shared sweet memories that had everyone reaching for tissues. And finally, my parents stood up together. Mom tapped her champagne glass gently with her fork, the delicate ringing sound cutting through the chatter. "We want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate our beloved daughter's wedding," Mom began, her voice warm and clear. There was something about the way she emphasized beloved that made me shift in my seat, a subtle weight to the word that felt pointed somehow. Mark must have noticed my discomfort because his hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. Dad continued, his arm around Mom's shoulders. "Watching Lily grow into the beautiful, accomplished woman she is today has been the greatest joy of our lives. She's always been special, always brought so much light into our home, so much energy and love." I smiled and nodded, though my face felt stiff. Of course they loved Lily. They loved both of us. I was just being oversensitive, reading too much into perfectly normal parental pride. Then Mom reached into her purse. She pulled out a stack of papers, official-looking documents with blue backing. "Jake, Lily," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, "your father and I wanted to give you something to start your new life together, something truly special." She held the papers up high enough for everyone to see. "We're giving you our family home as your wedding present." The gasps of surprise followed immediately by thunderous applause. People were standing up, clapping, some even wiping tears from their eyes at the generosity of it all. I froze completely. Beside me, Mark went absolutely rigid, his hand tightening painfully around mine. I stared at my parents, then swung my gaze to Lily, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was a joke, to admit this was some kind of elaborate prank. But nobody was laughing. My parents were beaming, their faces lit up with pride and joy. And Lily, my sister Lily, she wasn't surprised, not even a little bit. She was crying, yes, but they were happy tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. She was hugging Jake, who stood there with his mouth hanging open in shock, staring at my parents like they'd just announced they'd won the lottery. The house, my parents' house. The house with the mortgage I had been paying every single month for the last 5 years. Ever since Dad's hours got cut at the plant and Mom's arthritis got so bad she couldn't work full-time anymore at the elementary school where she'd been a secretary for 20 years. The house I'd been covering because they couldn't afford it, because they were my parents and they needed help. I managed to plaster a smile on my face, but inside I was screaming. Not once had they mentioned this. Not once had they even hinted at giving the house to Lily. They hadn't asked me, hadn't consulted me, hadn't even given me a courtesy heads up about what they were planning. "Tessa, you okay?" Mark whispered, his mouth barely moving. Still holding that painful smile as Lily and Jake made their way to the front of the room to hug my parents. An hour later, I couldn't take it anymore. The weight pressing down on my chest was too much. I found Mark standing by the bar, nursing a whiskey. "Can we leave?" I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please?" He took one look at my face and nodded immediately. "I'll get our coats." We made our excuses. Mark had an early meeting. We were so sorry to leave early. Such a beautiful wedding. Congratulations again to the happy couple. And we slipped out before anyone could protest too loudly or ask too many questions. The second the car doors closed, I burst into tears. Deep, gasping sobs that I'd been holding back for hours. "I can't believe they did that," I choked out as Mark started the engine. "I've been paying that mortgage for 5 years, Mark. 5 years. And they didn't even tell me. They didn't even talk to me about it first." "I know," Mark said grimly, his jaw tight as he pulled out of the parking lot. "It's completely unbelievable." The words came out sharp and angry. Did you see her face? She wasn't surprised at all. She knew exactly what they were planning. This was all arranged beforehand, and nobody thought to include me in the conversation. I wiped at my eyes angrily, mascara probably streaking down my face, not caring. This isn't even about the money. I don't care about the money. But they could have talked to me. They could have at least mentioned it before announcing it in front of 200 people. As we drove home through the darkening streets, memories kept flooding back. All the times my parents had shown such clear, obvious favoritism toward Lily. All the moments I'd tried to brush off or explain away. "Remember when I graduated college?" I said, staring out the window. "They gave me a card with $50 in it. Congratulations on your degree. Here's some gas money." But when Lily graduated 2 years later, they bought her a car, a brand new Honda Civic. "That wasn't right," Mark agreed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Or my 21st birthday, that dinner they skipped because Lily had a volleyball game. Not even a championship game, Mark, just a regular season game. But it was more important than my birthday." The more I talked, the more examples I remembered. Each one had seemed small at the time, easy to rationalize or excuse. But together, they painted a clear picture, a pattern of behavior that had been going on my entire life. My parents had attended every single one of Lily's events, every volleyball game, every choir concert, every award ceremony. But they'd found excuses to miss mine. Work obligations, prior commitments, feeling under the weather. There was always a reason, always an explanation that seemed almost reasonable. They bragged about Lily's accomplishments to everyone, told friends and neighbors about her scholarships, her honors, her achievements. But mine barely got mentioned. When someone asked about me, the responses were vague and brief before the conversation shifted back to Lily. By the time we got home, I was emotionally exhausted, drained from crying, from talking, from finally acknowledging what I'd spent years trying not to see. "Where are your parents going to live now?" Mark asked as we got ready for bed. "If they're giving the house to Lily and Jake, they'll need somewhere to go." I shrugged, pulling my pajamas on roughly. "I have no idea, and honestly, that's not my problem anymore." I turned off the light and rolled over, trying to ignore the ache in my chest that wouldn't go away, no matter how hard I tried to sleep. For the next 3 weeks, I buried myself in work. Projects, meetings, client presentations, anything to keep my mind occupied and away from thoughts of the wedding, the house, the betrayal. Mark never pushed me to talk about it, just stayed close and supportive. Then one evening my phone rang. Mom's name lit up the screen. Against every instinct screaming at me to ignore it, I answered. "Tessa, honey!" Mom's voice was bright and cheerful, as if absolutely nothing had happened. "We're having a family dinner this weekend. Your sister and Jake are back from their honeymoon in Maui, and we'd love for you and Mark to join us." I wanted to say no, wanted to hang up and block her number. But some stupid, hopeful part of me wondered if maybe they'd apologize. Maybe they'd finally explain. Maybe there was a good reason for everything that had happened. I said flatly, "We'll be there." Saturday arrived far too quickly. When we pulled up to the house, my parents' old sedan was already in the driveway, along with Lily's car. I hesitated before getting out, staring at the familiar front door. "You okay?" Mark asked gently. "Yeah," I lied. "Let's just get this over with." I walked up to the front door and stood there for a moment, my hand hovering near the bell. It felt strange not using my key, but this wasn't my parents' house anymore. It was Lily and Jake's house now. I rang the bell. Mom answered almost immediately, all smiles and warmth. "Tessa, Mark, come in, come in." She hugged me like nothing had happened, like she hadn't given away a house I'd been financially supporting for half a decade without even mentioning it to me. I hugged her back stiffly, my body tense. Dad was in the living room with Jake, watching some football game on the massive television. He stood when we entered, giving Mark a firm handshake and me a quick one-armed hug. "Where's Lily?" I asked, noticing her absence. "Oh, she's changing the curtains in the dining room," Mom said casually, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "She's been redecorating all week, making the place her own, you know?" My blood pressure spiked. 3 weeks. It had been exactly 3 weeks since the wedding, and Lily was already tearing through the house, changing things, making it hers as if she'd owned it for years instead of days. We walked through to the dining room, and there she was. My sister, standing on a small stepladder hanging new cream-colored curtains where Mom's old blue ones had hung for as long as I could remember. "Dinner's ready," Mom announced brightly. "Everyone, sit down." Took our seats around the familiar table, me between Mark and Dad, Mom and Lily across from us, Jake at the head of the table. The food looked amazing, as always. Mom's special pot roast with roasted vegetables, creamy mashed potatoes, fresh rolls. But I had absolutely no appetite. My stomach was twisted in knots. The completely consumed by Lily and Jake describing their honeymoon in Hawaii. The beaches, the sunsets, the snorkeling, the resort with the infinity pool. Every single detail, down to what they ate for breakfast each morning. I picked at my food and nodded occasionally, while Mark asked polite questions to keep the conversation flowing. Finally, when Lily paused to take a breath, Mom cleared her throat deliberately. "So, we wanted to talk to you about something, Tessa." Here it comes, I thought. "Well, as you know, we've given the house to Lily and Jake as their wedding present," Mom began. "Yes," I said flatly. "I noticed. The thing is, they're a young couple starting their life together. They need their own space, their own privacy." I remained silent, waiting for her to get to the actual point. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, not quite meeting my eyes. "What your mother is trying to say is that we can't live here with them. They need the house to themselves." "See," I said carefully. "So where are you planning to live?" Mom and Dad exchanged a look. A long, meaningful look that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. I noticed Lily suddenly became extremely interested in her mashed potatoes, pushed them around her plate with intense focus. Mom said slowly, drawing out the word, "We've been thinking about it quite a bit, and we've decided we're going to move to your vacation home. It's the perfect size for just the two of us, and it's in such a nice, quiet area." I very carefully set down my fork and knife. The vacation home they were referring to was a small cottage about 2 hours north of here. I'd bought it with my own money before I even met Mark. I'd saved for years to afford it, working overtime and weekends, skipping vacations and expensive purchases. It was my special place, my retreat, somewhere I could escape the city and just breathe. Occasionally, I'd let my parents use it when they wanted a weekend away, but that was my decision, my property, mine. "Get this straight," I said, keeping my voice as level as possible. "You gave your house away, the house I've been paying the mortgage on for 5 years, to Lily. And now you think you're just going to move into my vacation home without even asking me first?" "Tessa," Dad said, frowning at me like I was being unreasonable, "be realistic. Where else are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," I replied. "You had a house. You gave it away without consulting me, even though I'd been paying for it. And now you expect me to just hand over my vacation home to you?" "It's not like you use it that much anyway," Lily chimed in, her voice defensive. I turned to her slowly, unable to hide my anger anymore. "Are you serious right now? It's my property. I bought it with my money. I get to decide who uses it and when. Not you, not Mom, not Dad. Me." "You can't mean it. You're not actually saying no, are you?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," I replied clearly. "No, you are not moving into my vacation home. Not now, not ever." The table fell into complete silence, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that presses down on you from all sides. Then Mom's face crumpled. "How can you do this to us?" she cried, her voice breaking. "After everything we've done for you? We're your parents, Tessa." "Yes, and as my parents, you might have thought to discuss this with me before giving away a house I was financially supporting, and before deciding to take over my property without permission. You don't have the right to refuse us," Mom said, her voice rising sharply. "We have nowhere else to go now." "Actually, you have your house," I pointed out calmly, "the one I've been paying the mortgage on for 5 years. But you gave it to Lily, so now it's your problem to figure out where to live." Lily slammed her hand down on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. "God, you're so cruel and greedy. You've always been jealous of me because Mom and Dad love me more. You've always been envious of our relationship." I stared at her, genuinely stunned by the outburst. Then I turned back to her, suddenly feeling very calm. "If Mom and Dad love you so much, and you love them so much, then why don't you let them live here with you? This is a 4-bedroom house, plenty of room for everyone." She looked away quickly, suddenly finding her plate absolutely fascinating. That's not the point," she mumbled. "Jake and I need our privacy." "And I need my vacation home," I countered evenly. "Sounds like we both have needs that conflict with what Mom and Dad want." My parents started talking over each other then, telling me how wrong I was, how disappointing, how selfish, how ungrateful after everything they'd sacrificed for me over the years. I stopped listening. I stood up calmly and picked up my purse from where I'd hung it on my chair. "Mark, I think we're done here." He stood immediately, following me toward the door, while my family kept shouting behind us. My phone absolutely exploded with messages and calls. From my parents, from Lily, from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. I ignored every single one at first, but curiosity got the better of me, and I started reading them. Some called me selfish and heartless. Some begged me to reconsider. Some tried to guilt-trip me with detailed reminders of everything my parents had supposedly done for me over the years. Things that, when I actually thought about them, weren't nearly as significant or selfless as they were being portrayed. I showed some of the messages to Mark, who shook his head in complete disbelief. "I think I need to block them for a while," I said. "I can't keep reading these. It's making me crazy." "Do what you need to do," Mark said, kissing the top of my head. "Take care of yourself first. That's what matters." I blocked their numbers and their social media accounts, at least temporarily. I needed space to think, to process, to figure out how I felt about everything without constant bombardment. 2 weeks passed in blessed silence. No calls, no texts, no family drama invading my life every few hours. Mark and I fell back into our normal routine. Work, home, occasional dinners with friends who didn't try to steal my property or manipulate me into giving up things I'd worked hard for. It was peaceful. Was at my desk one afternoon reviewing a marketing campaign for a new product launch when my phone buzzed with an alert. I glanced down and felt my stomach drop through the floor. It was a notification from the security system at my vacation home. Motion detected. Front door opened. I quickly pulled up the app with shaking fingers. Someone had used a key to unlock the front door, but they hadn't disabled the alarm system. The security company would be calling me any second to verify whether this was authorized entry. Sure enough, my phone rang almost immediately. "Miss Wilson, this is Safeguard Security. We've detected entry at your property on Pine Ridge Road. Is this authorized?" "No," I said firmly, my voice not wavering despite my racing heart. "I'm not there, and absolutely no one has permission to be there. Please send the police immediately." An hour later, my phone rang again. Local number I didn't recognize. "Miss Wilson? This is Officer Ramirez from the Pine Ridge Police Department. We're currently at your property on Pine Ridge Road. We have 2 individuals here who claim to be your parents. They have keys to the property, but they've admitted they don't have your permission to be here." Closed my eyes, confirming what I'd already known the moment that alert came through. "Yes, those are my parents, but they absolutely do not have permission to be in my house." "I understand. How would you like us to proceed? We can remove them from the property, but since they used a key rather than breaking in, it's somewhat of a gray area regarding charges." "I'll come up there," I decided quickly. "My husband and I can drive up now. We're about an hour away." The drive felt both endless and too short. I alternated between fury and complete disbelief. How could they do this? After I'd explicitly, clearly told them no, they tried to move in anyway. Who does something like that? When we pulled up to my vacation home, a police cruiser sat in the driveway, lights off. 2 officers stood outside, and sitting on the front porch steps were my parents, looking absolutely miserable. Several suitcases and cardboard boxes were piled beside them. My father stood up immediately when he saw us. "Tessa, thank God you're here. Tell these officers there's been a misunderstanding." I got out of the car and approached the officers, deliberately ignoring my parents for the moment. "Thank you for responding so quickly. These are indeed my parents, but they do not have permission to be here." One of the officers nodded professionally. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges for trespassing?" My mother gasped audibly. "Tessa, you wouldn't," turned to look at her. "You broke into my house after I specifically, explicitly told you no. What exactly did you think would happen?" "We didn't break in," my father protested. "We used the key you gave us." "This is all your fault," my mother suddenly shouted, standing up from the steps. "If you had just let us stay here like we planned, none of this would have happened. We wouldn't be standing here being humiliated, treated like criminals." I stared at her, genuinely shocked by the outburst. "My fault? You gave away a house I was paying the mortgage on without consulting me, then tried to take over my property without permission, and somehow this is my fault? You're so arrogant," Mom continued, completely ignoring my point. "So irresponsible. We raised you better than this. We gave you everything." "Mom, stop," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You're embarrassing yourself. You and Dad just tried to break into my house to move in after I explicitly told you no. And now you're standing here in front of police officers yelling at me about how I'm being irresponsible?" That seemed to get through to her. She abruptly closed her mouth, but her eyes were still full of righteous indignation, like she was the victim here. I turned back to the officers. "Could I have a word in private, please?" We stepped away from my parents and Mark. I don't want to press charges against them, I said quietly. They're still my parents, even if they're being absolutely ridiculous right now. But I can't have them staying here either. The officer nodded understandingly. We get it. Family situations can be complicated. We can take them to the station for a few hours, give them a stern warning about trespassing, then release them. Sometimes a few hours in a holding cell is a good reality check for people. I considered this carefully. Maybe that was exactly what they needed, a wake-up call. Yes, please do that. The officers are going to take you to the police station for a few hours. I'm not pressing formal charges, but I want you to understand how serious this is. You cannot just move into someone's house without permission, even if you're family. The police car left with my parents in the back seat, looking small and shocked. While we waited for the locksmith I'd called, Mark and I arranged for their belongings to be taken to a nearby storage facility. I paid for 1 month up front and texted the details to Lily, since my parents' numbers were still blocked. The locksmith arrived and changed all the locks. By the time we left, the house was secure again, and I had the only keys. On the drive home, I felt completely drained, but also strangely liberated. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up to my parents' manipulation and refused to be taken advantage of. What do you think they'll do now? Mark asked as we neared our apartment. Probably go crying to Lily, I guessed. She got the house. She can deal with the responsibility that comes with it. I wasn't naive enough to think this was over, though. Knowing my mother, she'd find some way to make me look like the villain in all of this. She always did. I was right. A week later, I opened Facebook to find a long, dramatic post from my mother. It already had dozens of sympathetic comments from relatives and family friends. To be abandoned by your own child, it began. My husband and I, in our golden years, have been cast out like unwanted pets. Our eldest daughter, Tessa, had the police remove us from her vacation home like common criminals, leaving us with nowhere to go. Before went on, conveniently, that they'd given their house to Lily, that I'd been paying their mortgage for years, that they'd tried to move into my vacation home after I'd explicitly refused them. I scrolled through the comments, each one making my blood pressure rise higher. People calling me heartless, cruel, ungrateful, wondering how I could do this to my own parents. Something inside me snapped. I started typing my own response, and this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. I've stayed quiet about family matters until now, but since my mother has chosen to make our private issues public, I feel I need to share my side of the story. Here are the facts that were conveniently left out of my mother's post. I laid it all out. The 5 years of mortgage payments, the wedding gift announcement that blindsided me, their plan to move into my vacation home without asking, their attempt to move in anyway after I said no. I finished with, if my parents need a place to stay, perhaps they should ask my sister, who now owns a 4-bedroom house thanks to them, and me, since I paid for it. I added one final paragraph before hitting post. I've always done my best to help my family, but I won't be taken advantage of or painted as a villain for refusing to give up my property after already paying for theirs. Family goes both ways. It's about mutual respect, not just taking whatever you want. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments started flooding in, but unlike my mother's post, these were supportive. Cousins and aunts I hadn't heard from in months, telling me they had no idea about the mortgage payments. Friends expressing shock that my parents would give away a house I was supporting. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt exhausted. Broadcasting family drama publicly wasn't exactly satisfying, even if I was just defending myself. 2 days later, my cousin Jessica called. Hey, I wanted to check on you. Also, did you hear? Your parents tried to go back to their old house. I mean, Lily's house now, but she wouldn't let them in. I sat up straighter. Seriously? Yeah. Apparently she told them it's her house now, and there's no room for them. They're staying in some crappy apartment now, and your mom had to go back to working full-time just to afford the rent. I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me thought they deserved it. This was the situation they'd created for themselves. But another part of me still felt that pang of sympathy. They were still my parents, even if they'd treated me unfairly. After we hung up, I told Mark what Jessica had said. "It's just karma," he remarked. "Yeah," I agreed slowly, "but I don't feel as satisfied as I thought I would." "That's because you're a good person, Tessa, unlike some people we could mention." Over the next few weeks, my parents tried to contact me several times. I saw their names pop up on my phone, but couldn't bring myself to answer. I wasn't ready. The hurt was still too fresh, too raw. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, Mark asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I thought about it carefully. Maybe someday. Not for their sake, but for mine. Carrying around all this anger isn't healthy. And Lily? That's more complicated. She knew what they were planning. She was part of it from the beginning. And then she turned them away when they actually needed her. At least now I know exactly where I stand. "No more illusions about who's important to them," Mark said, pulling me close. He was right. As painful as this entire experience had been, it had stripped away all the pretense. I'd spent years trying to win my parents' approval, trying to be as special to them as Lily was. Now I finally understood that was never going to happen. And strangely, that knowledge was freeing. The next morning, I saw another call from my mother. This time, I let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it later, her voice was different, smaller, less demanding. "Tessa, we made a mistake, a big one. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but please call us back. We need to talk." I deleted the message without calling back. Maybe someday I'd be ready to hear their apology, if that's what they were offering. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have them back in my life, but on new terms, with clear boundaries firmly established. But not today. Today, I was still learning how to put myself first, something I should have done a very long time ago. As for my vacation home, I decided to list it for rent. The extra income would be nice, and I liked the idea of the place being used and enjoyed rather than sitting empty as a reminder of everything that had happened. Sometimes the family you deserve isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you choose.